Well, we'll do a call to order for September 5th meeting, Planning Environmental and Development Committee. Carolyn Campbell.
Here.
Joe Gadameller.
There.
Carl Kaminsky.
Present.
Jimmy Kearns. Lou Ness. John Wright and myself here, and Larry is absent, albeit why I'm here.
I would make a motion to let Lou Ness in whenever she calls in, if that's all right.
I'll second.
Okay, you want to take a vote on that? I'm fine with that. Carl? Yep.
Good with me. I'll make a motion. Yes.
When Lou Ness calls in, we'll let her in. And
Mr. Kearns can ride.
note that Jimmy's here, Jimmy Kearns.
Thank you, ma'am.
And minutes approval for the August 1st meeting. Do we have somebody make a motion? Carl, seconded by Joe Gadameller. Vote to approve that. Jim?
Yep.
Carl?
Yep.
Joe?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
And I'd say yes too, so minutes are approved. Public comment? Okay, great. So, Vanderspool?
Hi, my name is Jan Vanderspool. I live at 8708 Bull Run Trail. I'm here for something slightly different than my usual. Yay. You've heard from others about spongy moths crisis and infestations. I wanted to add a data point to that. Myself and others have encouraged the board to fund what I made up a name of funding an emergency response team for spongy moss, because we've also heard that it can take years, 2 years, 3 years for getting all the approvals and okie dokies to spray the bacteria that can kill off the spongy moss. Well, 2 to 3 years is not useful. Here's the data point. I was just discussing with one of my neighbors down the block. Why are the tree guys there? Well, he had an infestation, what is that? Last summer when we were talking about it. And he said it completely defoliated all his red oak trees and his hickories. He was sawing down 7 trees. He lost them. And I'm talking, substantial trees. And he's thinking he's probably going to have to do 3 more. So please keep that spongy moth response at the top of your list and try and create an agency or department that can get the okie dokie to respond to situations in as needed that summer or whatever, instead of 2 or 3 years. We got to do something. I mean, that's really a lot of trees in my opinion. So, thanks.
Thank you. No other speakers for public comments. Go on to members' comments. Anybody have any comments, Jim?
No.
Carolyn? Okay. I just had one over the weekend, just thought I'd bring it up. The animal control, there was an owl at an open house, a little baby owl that was grounded by the entrance of this townhome. And I got a phone call and from one of the real estate agents that were trying to show, and I said, I'll call animal control. They followed up, in about half an hour they were there. They said it was a young owlet that was going to be, that was obviously displaced from the parent owl, and they were going to take it and nurse it until it was able to be on its own. They followed through. No problem solved. I was very impressed with the animal control. I just thought I'd bring that up. Yeah, that was really okay. On the new business, I think we have 8:40. It's almost a little early, but it's Melvin von Bergen. If you want to step on up. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. And good morning to the board.
You can sit down or stand, whatever you're comfortable with there.
I would prefer a seat.
Sure.
There you go.
Okay, and I'll be right here at the end. It'll be fine.
Thank you. Is there anything that you wanted to say, you know, in retrospect to?
Yes, I would. Now's the time.
Now's the time.
Okay, I've been serving as a Hebron Drainage District Commissioner for several years,
Thank you.
plus 45, I think. 50 next spring. Anyway, enjoy the work. It doesn't pay, period, but there's some satisfaction in it. For the most part, we've had good commissioners. We're on a very limited budget. We do have 7,000 acres in the Hebron Drainage District number 1, organized in 1912 through 1915. So it does have some years on it. We're going to be in dire need of replacing a lot of tile in the next few years. Main tile, clay tile have a 50-year lifespan, and we've exceeded that just a little bit. And a lot of them, this year will be a tough year on them. Clay tile function much better if they're constantly kept wet, but when they dry out, that's when they crack and do lots of different things. So anyway, I am running for that position. I realize it is a 3-year position. I've been there before. I look forward to serving again, but it will remain the decision of the board if I serve or not.
Thank you for serving.
Thank you. Yes,
Any member questions for Mr. Von Bergen?
Mel, where do you see, I know we've had this discussion several times, a bunch of us, about drainage districts in this county, the lack thereof. What would the county board, in your suggestion, need to do to expand these drainage districts?
I guess funding is a major concern. Right now, we're off the tax rolls, and we do assess the landowner a fee per acre. This is not near substantial with a budget of, our income is $24,500. And we have $60,000 projects that we've done in the last 5 years for major tile replacement. And what we've done, we've gone to the landowners and said, hey, here's the deal. We can go through the process if we want, or if you agree to pay your portion of this, we'll just, you'll write us a check and we'll go ahead and do the deal, and you can look over what we're gonna do. And that's what we've done the last 3 times. And some landowners have to cough up $10,000, $12,000, but so be it. If they go through the other process, it'll be that way anyway, plus a lot more legal fees. So they've been satisfied. We as commissioners have been satisfied. But it's very, very challenging to meet our commitments. You know, we have to have insurance. We pay dues to our association. And our commissioners draw no salary. So it's strictly a volunteer thing. But getting good commissioners is a challenge. We've only had 1 or 2 that less than desirable in the last 20 years. So.
Okay.
Yes.
So you said clay tiles crack if they get dry. Is there an alternative? Are you thinking in terms of type of tile that would be more suitable?
We haven't done any clay tile in the last 20 years.
So what do you use?
It's all plastic,
It's all plastic?
yes.
Okay,
A little bit longer lifespan on plastic.
right, okay.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Van Bergen.
I have a question.
Oh, Lou's here.
We
Okay.
need, I make a motion to let Lou into the meeting.
We already did.
Yep,
Oh, you did that before I got here.
yeah. Go ahead, Lou.
Okay, and I may be, this might not be a question for you, sir. When I spoke to farmers, they said that the county, and correct me if I'm inaccurate here, was required to create a countywide drainage map. Is that accurate? And if so, has that been done?
That question was directed at me? Okay.
Yes.
No countywide drainage map has been instituted to my knowledge. We did one about 5 years ago. We did a complete overview of our whole district, of all our tile, all the main tile, and our ditches and our boundaries, and our various sub-districts within the district due to elevation. And then basically, tile is put in on the elevation in surrounding areas to get your watersheds for your various sub-districts. That little situation cost us 20 grand to do that.
Wow.
And that was a lot of money for our drainage district to come up with at that time, but we decided to go ahead and do it. And the company that we worked with out of Champaign, they said, well, if you're willing to do it, we'll give you 5 years to pay for it. So that worked out very well for us, and we got it done. And it was very, very helpful in looking at what our needs are gonna be and what should be done in various things. We've got some areas that should be put into our district. The landowners were very reluctant to do this when this was started. But now we continually get a lot of runoff from adjoining non-drainage district properties, and we have to deal with the water. So with that said, sometime we'll have to have more land brought into our district, but also for funds, we're probably gonna have another increase to our landowners, and most of them do, they're pretty cognizant of the fact that, you know, today's prices are a lot different than they were 10, 20 years ago. And so they'll be agreeable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we get a copy of that drainage map? John, do you know? It's probably on file somewhere.
You know, I don't know that. I don't know that it's on file or where that's at. I mean, years ago, we didn't,
Joanna.
Scott's got it.
No.
Well, I just wanted to add to the question about a countywide drainage map. We actually have undertaken that project working with GIS, planning development, DOT, to assemble a lot of the documents that we've accumulated over the years or that have come across the county. It's not in any organized fashion, so our first attempt is to organize what we have, all these legacy documents into GIS, and give GIS the opportunity to try to make some good sense out of it, because these are a lot of hand-drawn documents that in many cases are almost
right.
Yeah.
Century old.
80 years old,
Right?
yeah.
And so once we do this, phase 2 is going to be meeting with our drainage district partners and collecting their information too, which may be updated, may identify additional pipes that we may not have on record, to really develop, as Member Ness has indicated, a countywide GIS map. And in that way, then we would have everything all in one place, all compiled to the extent that we can and to the extent the documents do exist. A lot of it is, just institutional knowledge that's been passed on from drainage district member to drainage district member. So I just wanted to report that we're underway with that project. It's a pretty substantial undertaking because of the legacy that we're dealing with. But that is underway. GIS is on top of it, and we've got a lot of support staff that's assisting. And
When do you think, I don't want to pin you down, Scott, but how long do you think it will take for you to have a working documents to look at.
And I'd rather not be pinned down. We're still just evaluating the documents that are coming in, the quality of the documents. And the GIS needs to, once again, develop
Okay.
that. And so I couldn't.
It's a patchwork.
Yes.
I'll bet it is.
Hand-drawn documents, and we're kind of giving Nicole and Gattuso a little time to assess how big a job is this, but we got to start somewhere. And
Absolutely.
it's just, you know, we're gonna lose this legacy of hand-drawn documents and memories and all that. So we want to start recording them and getting them in the public domain.
And one thing,
Thank you.
as Pete mentioned, we have Nicole and our GIS team working on this. They're trying to do within their capacity right now. And, you know, they have obviously a full workload of other projects that are ongoing and underway. So this is trying to fit this in between, and she needs to determine what can they do based on their capacity. So there's a lot of things that we're working through, but I just want to report that is underway, and we're excited about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just a quick question. I know we're in the weeds already, but who originally did that? Did the feds do that for the agriculture? Farmer by farmer back in
In the
1915,
1910s.
1910s.
The
I
title.
thought there would be a federal program that, you know, to
Title
save
is really
land.
opposed to the record.
There are some requirements, such as through, and we can speak to, like through the subdivision ordinance that requires a submittal of drainage information, you know, but previously that was just submitted and just put in a file and not really utilized. So that's what we're trying to do, is resurrect some of those documents that are already produced that we may have on hand, and now trying to add those into that one overall clearinghouse of information through GIS. So that's, when you ask who did it, there's so many different hands that we did it, which kind of speaks to the quality of the documents
Back
too.
before there were recordings,
Yeah.
right, of such.
Well, you have to remember, when they put this in 1910, we didn't have a zoning ordinance.
Right.
Or a building code.
Yeah.
So you didn't come to us for building permit. That didn't exist. If you wanted to build a house, you just went out and built a house.
And if you broke a tile and the basement flooded, oh, well,
Yeah.
crazy.
I would like to add another.
Sure.
Most of our tiling was done in the 1912 to 1915 era. We had a resident person that did it at that time. I was not even close to being around, but he did live on site. He did live in the side house. This was 1912, so things were different. He came out of South Dakota, and he dug year around. So they were a little bit different, made of different material. The bodies were.
Yeah, interesting.
We did have another thing happen a couple of years ago, gifted on us by the highway department. They were doing a revision up by the Illinois 47 and Vandegar and O'Brien Road, south of Hebron, about 3 miles. They had excess water that was coming in from some of our tiles up north. So they laid a pipe or a hose down the ditch, 1,200 feet, made a 90-degree turn, went 20 feet into the field and punched a hole in one of our tiles. Never really asked us for this, or never, you know, but they obviously had to have a clue that's where the tile was, because it just didn't happen. But they did leave that run for about 3 months while they were under construction.
Interesting. That's a great use.
I appreciate all the time you put into that project. He's got the best sweet corn too. I had some yesterday.
It's been a good year.
Thanks again, and thanks for your interview.
Am I done?
You were done. We'll
Okay,
vote and
thank
let
you.
you know how it turned out.
Well,
Not a lot of competition, but.
I can deal with whatever. Pretty easy that much. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks again. And is Jessica Beverly here? We're right on time almost here.
Rocking and rolling this morning.
Yes. Thanks for coming in.
No problem.
So you want to be a regular member right now? You are
An alternate.
An
So if you
alternate.
choose not to put me in as a regular member, you just leave it alone.
okay. Thank you. And do you have anything that you want
Sure.
to say?
I have 5 years' experience in zoning. I did municipal zoning in Skokie before we moved here 3 years ago today. And then I came here, saw that you all were looking for zoning help, and I've been an alternate since then. I've been increasingly relied upon as an alternate in the last year and a half. We're losing a member now, and Mr. Stone retired. So I've been attending more and more meetings, and I decided that it was time to just apply for the full member spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thanks for that. Thanks for that. Any questions for Jessica Beverly?
Everybody looks at me on this. Where do you see the, in this county, McHenry County, what are some of the things the county board should look at and changes to our UDO?
I'm interested to stick around today and listen to the short-term rental discussion. I assume that's going to be part of the UDO. As far as zoning goes, I don't have any specific complaints. I think staff is really on top of anything that needs to be changed. When they encounter unique problems, they tend to revise the ordinance in a timely fashion and run it through the process to make sure that it's working.
Okay. And I'm trying to look through, but your history prior to being on the zoning board, what other things were you on?
Well, in
Other
Skokie,
organizations?
so before I moved here, I was on the Sustainable Environmental Commission in Skokie, and then I moved to the zoning board, and I had very little kids. We moved here when my son was 18 months old and my oldest was 3, so I had little kids. I wasn't on a lot of boards and didn't do a lot of stuff. I worked for the federal government and the Social Security Administration for 10 years. I wrote administrative law judge decisions for disability cases. And yeah, we were in Skokie for 8 years.
Okay. Where do you see, you talk about sustainable energy. So you obviously were quite active in that prior to coming here. Give me your opinion of these new solar farm laws.
I didn't work on that. That was passed after I left. I did a lot of work on the Climate and Equity Jobs Act, and I did a lot of community education on benefits that were available and things like that. I did not work on the solar siting law. I did help staff with the UDO changes and working through some of those and asking questions of people that I know who passed the law. Not every project is a great project. There were a few that have gone through that I'm like, I was vocal on this on the ZBA hearings that I participated in as well. Not every project is a great project, but they have to get the easements from their adjoining landowners. If they can't get the easements, the project dies. If they can't get permission from the railroad, the project dies. So it's not really up to me personally to have an opinion on that. Like, it just kind of is what it is.
Okay. Good answer. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good response. Anybody else?
Jim covered mine. I was gonna ask you about solar.
Yeah.
We have a really amazing staff, and they have to work with so many different people to get these projects over the finish line. Since 2018, the county's approved like 32 solar farms, and there's only 5 that are up. Like 50 to 60% of all of these applications will fail and die. This is just the first
The other
hurdle.
thing is they can't hook into the grid right now because PGM is in the middle of rewriting the rules. So
If they don't have it sorted already, it's not gonna work. Even if every solar farm application was approved and built, they would only have capacity for 12% of our available farmland on the grid.
Seems like a kind of a stupid.
I don't make the rules.
Yeah.
Neither do we, that's the sad part.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate it, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't know about this next person.
Yeah. Do we know Mary?
Who's that? Who that?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Donner. I live at 2536 Verity Street, Woodstock. And I saw that this position was available, and I've had my taste for zoning since I've become the chairman for the Regional Plan Commission. So things that I've heard here are things that we're actually talking about too. And it's going to be more important once we get done with what we're doing now to move forward with the UDO to support it. That's going to be the next possible way to get into it, but I miss it. I was a zoning and land use paralegal for Dan Curran for 17 years. It was a long time ago, I don't doubt that. But I've pretty much kept up with people and things that are happening. As far as solar farms are concerned, I'm going to go back to the RPC and say, there's too much going on. We need to have somebody make a presentation to all of us so that when it comes down to it and we're talking about it, we can be more educated. There's another way of looking at that too. I'd like to make sure that all these presentations that we're doing are being streamed and filmed so that somebody else can come in and look at it and get really good information. We've done that so far. I don't think that'll be different with solar farms. And we have so many meetings. I'm supposed to be retired, but I guess I'm kind of busy. Doesn't make any difference. I live for that stuff. So ask away.
It's the answer to long life, never really retire.
No, you can't.
So, obviously, there's two up for this.
Yes.
If it went somewhere else, would you be interested in an alternate?
One way or the other, I see two of us. I see I see at least one very competent person that you know well, but I would prefer the regular job, but otherwise, of course.
Yeah.
This isn't gonna end, but for right now, the solar
Right.
farm part is gonna end, but you now have gravel pits that you're going to be looking at and what you do with those, and that's specifically what I did for many years. I was even naming them off in my head on the way over here going, oh, it's over there, it's down there.
Right.
And some you win and some you lose, let's put it that way. You can have all the best information in the world and take it, and you have to see what's there and look at what's there and give it up. You can't be using your, oh gee, I really like that person, or oh, I really like their yard, or oh, I really like this or that. It's, once it's on paper, it's on paper.
What township do you live in?
Greenwood, next door. I lived in Monday Township until 3 years ago.
Okay, so we don't have anybody else in that one, right?
Not in Greenwood, from what I understand.
Okay.
You don't have anybody in Greenwood? No.
I just wanted to verify that. That's my only question. 'Cause you
Oh,
answered
I
all
live
my
in Greenwood,
questions.
yes.
You answered all my questions.
Oh, thank you. Anybody else?
Well, I've known you for 30 years, maybe, something like that, so I'm comfortable. I think I know what she's gonna do.
I'm a hard worker. That's the best I can come up with. If I get into it, it's kind of like you get further and further into it.
Right. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, man, appreciate it.
Thank you.
So then first, I move that we do the Hebron Drainage District appointment for Melvin von Bergen.
Okay,
I'll second that one.
motion by Joe and seconded by Carolyn already there. So, not a lot to put on the comparison board for Scott, so. You want to vote, just take it right to vote, or any discussion on it? Does anybody want to discuss this? Okay, Jim?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Lou, do you have a vote on
Yes.
Bergen? Yes, and I will
Yes.
go yes, so it's unanimous. So that's a yes. And now for the zoning board of appeals.
Before we pick one, I think really the only discussion from my side of things is who gets the full term and who gets the part term. And I'm I'm open to hear what people want to do, and I think we could then do it in one motion. I mean, that's up to you guys, how you want to do it, but.
I do have a comment. I love that Mary Donner has stepped up. She is the chair of that commission that she's working on, which is doing very, very important work. But I also love that Jessica Beverly is new to the taking a more permanent, substantial role in our county. Is very knowledgeable. And if I were to think of this in expanding our network, adding to it, I would love to have a new person come in as a permanent part of that commission, just to anchor in another individual in this county who wants to step. We already know Mary's worth and what she's doing, and it's great, and I appreciate it. But I also do appreciate that Jessica is stepping up into a more permanent role, willing to do that and bring her expertise. And I think any time that we can engage with new people in that way in our work is so important.
Thank you, Lou. Jim, do you want to opine on that?
She's got her hand up.
Oh, well, no, I was ready to jump in anytime. Well, I think we have two great candidates, obviously, both of them have experience. I do feel, and I know that Mary's done a great job in her role with RPC. To the extent that Jessica is new, she's new to the county, but she's not new to this board, the ZBA. She's been on there for 3 years as an alternate, and more recently, almost as a full-time member of that board. And I feel that having given that commitment for the last 3 years in the role that she's asking to go full-time for, my feeling is that we would ordinarily take that part-time person and put them into the full-time role, allow Mary to come in as the alternate, and over time, I'm sure that position would transition into a full-time role as well. I mean, Jessica has definitely put the time in and understanding our zoning in this particular role. So my feeling would be she would take on the full-time role and bring Mary in as the part-time.
Kind of like seniority, it's just a natural transition.
Seems to me.
Although it's not like that normally, right? Because they do interview. Joe?
I don't disagree with that rationale, but I have a different twist on it. I think Mary Candley's going to have a lot of meetings in the next year or two while she's doing the 2050 plan. And so I think if we put her as the alternate, she's not going to be suddenly buried in meetings doing both. That may be something she wants to or doesn't want to do. I don't know. I didn't really ask her that question, but it seems to me that would fit so that she'd be in a spot that, 2 years from now, or whenever the 2050 plan's done, or she can be in a spot to apply for the next roll up and do full-time at that point.
That's a great point too, Joe. I'm almost embarrassed to say, but I thought we were doing just for one position, but it is for both positions.
Well, if
the alternate and the regular position. So it's certainly in our right on the agenda to position both of them for today's vote. So is there anybody else that disagrees that we wouldn't be moving up Jessica for a full-time and putting Mary in for the alternate? Does anybody else disagree with that logic?
I'm Switzerland on this because I think both candidates are extremely qualified, better than a lot of the current sitting members. And I think Jessica has a lot of strengths just in contacts. And I was very happy with that. So I don't disagree with Joe and Carol on this. I think, and we all know Mary, and Joe's point about meeting schedules is gonna be pretty
It's
busy.
busy here.
And, so I would agree with the way you guys are going here. I might have gone differently, but the two candidates are so strong. And I'd rather keep both of them.
Yeah, I'd hate to lose either one of them.
Move, if Mary's okay with that alternate position.
I don't think it's a,
She's not okay with it, she's shaking her head back.
No, that's not true. I think, I'm sorry, I think you're going to be wonderful. Absolutely. I was born and raised in Skokie. But for Joe, one of the reasons that I became the chairman was because we were behind on getting this done.
yeah.
And now we are on schedule to be able to quite possibly get it into the county the first quarter next year.
I don't mean to cut you off either, Mary, but it's at our discussion now, and I don't think
Oh,
it's,
no.
I don't think it's right for either one of you to talk right now.
Well, he did say.
I did.
I certainly
I'm not on there.
agree.
I think she's gonna be wonderful. I just wanted to make sure you knew that this
No,
position
because
was
I could, there are things I want to ask you, but I just don't, because I think that the interview portion's over, and I just don't think it's fair to either of you.
So I'll rest my point there, is that I really like Mary on that, and I hope that the alternate position would be great for her to step into that, and then at some point, the next one opens up.
As I see it, it's a short-term alternate position.
Yeah.
Right, because, it's gonna,
They-
if you go on the county website, there are so many that are,
Yeah.
right. So, does anybody want to make that motion? Make the motion for Jessica for
Full-time.
full-time and Mary as an alternate, all in one vote?
I'll make that motion.
We already got it with Joe and or Carolyn and
Sorry.
Lou. We'll have you for a second, Lou.
Second.
Okay. So going to vote, Jim?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that's unanimous also. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and thank you both, honestly. Thank you both. I think that McHenry County is being well served right now with the two of you. Okay, going on to presentation. I think that's Adam.
Yes, sir.
Come
You
on.
know what, actually,
No, he's not yet.
yeah, we're not yet. For whatever reason, we can,
Yeah,
you guys can readjust it, but yeah, we can do the routine consent would be 7.
Okay,
I don't know why.
so there are no presentations for today other than your budget.
Yeah,
review
so they got put at
discussion.
8.
Okay, great. So the routine consent agenda, does anybody want to pull anything off of these three? I read through them, okay, so. Lou, are you good with our routine consent agenda? Did you want to pull anything off?
No, it's fine. Thank you.
I only have one question.
Okay,
It's not really, I don't really want to pull it, but I'd like to answer a question on 7.1 on the conservation easements.
mhm.
How do we select that measurement of that easement or the diagram of it? Because they kind of go all over the place, don't they? And how do you select that area?
It's up to the applicants to decide what they want to include in their conservation easement. This one in particular works a little bit different. I'll get into the details, but ultimately when they trigger the detention requirement, they can, sometimes you're gonna be short, and they can go up to 5% and say, this area of my property will be the impervious area. But they could be short of that if they have 100 acres and they're not close to that. They may plan for the future and say, well, I'm thinking about potentially putting a future building here or there. So that sometimes plays a role. So we don't tell them, well, this is what you currently have. Sometimes they might go a little bit outside the boundary. Sometimes they might say, well, I'm going to try to stick as close to my edges as I can. And that's where we rely on the survey to get those exact measurements and dimensions and get that recorded so that those edges can always be verified just in case they start getting close to that 5% threshold so they don't exceed it.
And what if they don't have enough land for then they have to build a detention?
Essentially, yes. Either build a detention or remove some impervious to get themselves down back under the threshold of triggering detention and work within kind of that scope. And it's gonna work differently for every owner depending on what their needs are. And sometimes they just need that extra amount. Sometimes, well, it's just kind of nice to have it. And so maybe they say, you know, they weigh their options and say, I'll just pull some of this out, get myself back under. But sometimes they really need it, and so they do move forward with detention, essentially, or some portion of detention for that. But it comes down to them and their planning and how they want to do it. And the benefit of the conservation easement, especially on large agricultural properties such as this at 60 acres, I'll get into it a little bit more, but what ends up happening is you're going to have farmers or most of these are ag purposes to try to get to different areas of the site. They're going to want a gravel drive for their equipment, maybe a barn for storage for some material in this corner, maybe some in that corner. And so the impervious area becomes very spread. And part of the difficulty is trying to capture all of that into one detention area. So it could be that maybe there's multiple. If they can't work within the conservation easement, maybe it's a combination of the two, which is what we'll see here of some conservation and some detention. And they basically work with an engineer to see what their possibilities are, what's feasible, and then go from there.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I don't want to pull that.
Okay.
I needed that answer for my own.
So while he's up here, this is Stoyan Kolev. This is our new chief stormwater engineer. Took over the stormwater division almost a month. Yeah, not quite, 3 weeks. So, yeah, we're excited to have him.
I've been with the county for six months. So.
Welcome to the family, don't laugh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I move that 7.1, 2, and 3 be approved as the routine consent agenda.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Carl. Go right to vote. Jim?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
And I vote yes too. That's a unanimous vote on that too. Okay, budget reviews.
All right. Oh, you got to share it? I want to get it. All right.
We should talk later. Okay. I saw your emails about 8 times.
Thanks, Bert.
Oh, yeah.
That went through too. All right, so FY '24. All right, cool, thank you. Budget presentation, budget requests. So this is a pretty straightforward year for P&D. We're midterm, kind of mid-effort on our major projects. So we talked a little bit about the 2050 comp plan. That's materializing, that's shaping into something tangible. And so more to come certainly on that. In January, we adopted the 2021 building code series. Those are in full effect, and no major surprises with those. Probably our biggest one coming up will be the energy conservation code, which is expected to roll out in October. So we'll have some that may cause some controversy, statewide. So we'll see what that looks like, though. We inherit that in 180 days to adopt it once it's rolled out. We have some good news with the IDA, Illinois Housing Development Authority. That grant, we just completed it in terms of all the work. We're just got to go through the closeout documents. The good news on it is there are 2 properties of the 5 that we demolished, of the abandoned properties that we demolished under that. 2 of them were done this year. 1 of them is already sold and we got the lien back. So that was the one up on O'Brien Road. So that was, we were pretty excited about that. And it just happened on Friday that we got that check. So we're midterm for USGS and Illinois State Water Survey for the well monitoring. We're going into year 2, coming up in 24, and then 25 will be year 3. So we'll be coming back with those contracts. Those were approved last year. And then the 2 at the bottom are probably the ones that we're most excited about, because this is, these have been focused on for so long in terms of what they represent. And that's, our efficiencies and kind of the changing of our process and modernizing our operation. These 2 software platforms, Brightly on the right is, it was approved earlier this year as a project for our permit management software after we abandoned the DevNet project. And then Bluebeam was just approved last month in terms that will allow us for digital reviews. So we'll get into some of the particulars and why those are so focused so much of focus for the budget. But that's kind of in summary. We don't have any supplemental requests this year. So it's pretty straightforward to put this budget together and put the request here. But it's also, in terms of being straightforward, it's also one of our most important budgets because we're starting to allocate funds towards these efforts. Brightly, Bluebeam, they're just changing how we're working, changing how we're functioning. And those are starting to be the foundation of our operation going forward. Some of the routine performance indicators, at the top line, single-family residences, we have 20 as of May 31st. Since then, we've had another 15, so we're at 35 at present. And in comparison, Joe, your statistic there, we only have 15 wrecking permits, so it's...
We're actually building homes.
It's a net growth, yeah. We're not quite at the same scale as Woodstock and Wonder Lake and some of those large developments that are going through, but in our own little way, we're very proud. One of the other asterisks that I set up on there, 90% of our reviews in 10 days. That's been our goal since 2016. We've been tracking it. We've been inching closer and closer and closer. We're above it. Right now, we're at 91.8. We had a little dip. I got the next slide that'll show that. But I highlighted that one because up until last month, we had 9 consecutive months where we were averaging above 90%. So our staff is just kind of rocking and rolling. So the winter's in there, but also summer. This is the main part of that construction season. March through June is just, it's busy. So our folks have been rocking and rolling, to say the least. And online is still emerging, and it's still a big wave of our permits. Almost 70%. I think it's almost 72 to date, but as of May 31st, it was 69%, about 710 of those permits, whether they're new submittals or resubmittals, go through our ad hoc portal. Brightly is going to change how we operate. So that permit system will allow 24/7 access. It'll also provide status updates, allow documents to be uploaded, also allow communications. So whether that's on the permit review side or on the inspection side, it will take a lot of our staff time away from these kind of mundane tasks and get them into some more of the technical aspects and other areas that we can improve. So it will, in essence, it'll work out a lot of the bugs that we got to deal with. The next piece we have that I highlighted on here is going to be for compliance. And zoning petitions. Our zoning petitions are way up. You see that more than anybody. We have another 3 or 4. We average about 4 a month. This year, we've come out a little bit hotter out of the gate because of the solar applications. In addition to the petitions being up, our revenues are up. You'll see quite high in that category. And then in compliance, we broke down trying to kind of always improve and get more stats. One of those stats that we've been able to break out, and this has just been a manual operation and one that we're going to take going forward is how many violations and how many unfounded cases we have with our total number of complaints. So in this one, we've had 240 total requests for service, 190 of those were turned into violations, and 50 of those were unfounded, or items that just, we had to explain, hey, that's just not gonna be an ordinance violation at this point. So, again, I emailed this out. If you have it, if you see something in there you wanna dive deeper into, feel free to let us know, okay? Then this is our chart. This is what we send out to our staff every month once we get the data back. This you can see those first several months we were above that 90 mark, and we dipped a little bit to 85 in July. July was a busy month in terms of operations, and then just as it were. So everybody gets a day off, I guess. So any questions on that? But we're real proud of this statistic, and we're very excited to see how it shapes up going forward. In terms of money, our expense budget is status quo. We have had a little bit of adjustment, certainly with personnel, that adjusts annually. But in terms of our contractual and our commodities, they're staying the same. And I mentioned why this is an important budget. We've recalibrated a little bit those commodities and those contractuals to better suit where we're going. So a good example of that, we haven't added any line items, but a good example of that is we've a year and a half, 2 years ago, the fleet for P&D transitioned from owned vehicles to leased vehicles. Completely different terms of maintenance requirements. So we had an allocation of money for these vehicles that were 10, 12, going 150 to 200,000 miles a year. They required all that maintenance. Well, now we've kind of shifted some of that over to where we were deficient before, which was software. Some of our supportive software, Canva, Adobe Professional, things that are going to supplant or help and facilitate getting the digital reviews done. We only had a couple $100 in there and a couple seats. That's about all it covered. So shifting some of those numbers around, recalibrating it, will really allow us to transition really smoothly in terms of where we're going whether it's a digital review process or whether it's just long-term needs for the applicants. So one of the ones that we highlighted before was printing costs. Our revenue side was maybe $2,000 in terms of printing. Last year, we're at $23,000 because we didn't have a solution for handling these data, the sets, the PDF sets. This year, it's down a little bit more. People have adjusted and brought in their own prints, but it's still at $12,000 to date. So it's very high. Let's see, anything else I want to highlight there? I don't believe so.
Can we ask questions at all, or should we wait?
Absolutely.
Go for it.
Absolutely.
Does this include your software and all the updates of your software systems and everything? Is that in your?
So this doesn't. So that is actually through the IT budget, general fund, if I'm not mistaken. So when we were doing the DevNet project, that was one of the big targets for swapping them. We needed to find a vendor also that hit that budget item without totally blowing the whole project up.
That's why I was asking.
So they did, yeah. Long term, there will be implications. So just last month with Bluebeam's approval, that was an ARPA funded project that'll be good for 3 years. Once that comes off, and it's run by the health department currently. Once that rolls off that 3 years, then we would expect P&D to we'll be back here asking for it. Assuming it is successful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Revenues. Our revenues are up. Permits are up. So we have it's kind of two eras. Pre-COVID and post-COVID. Our post-COVID numbers in terms of permits are that we've just never looked back. So we're up. It's in that 11% range, 11 to 12% range. Revenues are in about the same. We've made some adjustments in terms of what we project for revenues, so we've adjusted to escalate to meet those permit volumes to be the norm now. So permits, we're still up 63% to date. Stormwater's up 56% over the projected numbers. Zoning, we talked a little bit about that, where it's 159%. Again, those petitions are far above average, and the size of them generates quite a big number in terms of fees. Our penalty fees are a little bit higher, 60% than where we're at. That is somewhat nice to see, because we just started getting funds from OV Court. So we just started collecting fines. I think this is the third year, say just. But it was always a little bit of a skewed number in terms of what we actually collect for fines for the county. So that's been a little bit easier to track. And then one of another statistic that we've been tracking this past is the second year is going to be the estimated year-to-date construction value of the permits that we've issued. And again, these are always going to be pretty low estimates. This one's at $62.1 million in terms of construction value that's been applied for this year. Doesn't mean it's all been built yet. Doesn't mean any of it's been built yet, but a lot of it has. As we go forward, Brightly's got a way of comparing this proposal and the estimated construction value, and they have a database that's actually maintained by the ICC for construction costs in your general area, and we can kind of modify that. So we'll have an estimated value, and then we'll have a control that we can compare the two. So we'll end up getting a comparison to that number in the future.
Is your project on this chart, your projections are annualized? Is that why they're higher?
The percentages, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, so I don't want to say that it's a false read at this point, but this is the big revenue period of time. Once we get into October and November, we still have permit flurries, but it's not quite as consistent. So it does, every year it's a little bit up, but it does kind of come down to that 100% mark. It gets to about the same spot. Karen?
Yeah, I had a question also about the chart. So you're showing the blue is actual, the yellow is projected, and you're saying that, for example, building permits are up 63%. So that's where you're coming up with your projected. Is that, am I reading that right?
So the projected is always, right now, we've projected our revenues for '24. So that's in the budget that we've proposed, and we've actually maintained that at $390,000 for next year going forward. And so what that really is a comparison of our projection from last year and what we're realizing to date.
So that's 63, because your actual is 63% higher than last year, or is that not how it's rated?
That's month.
63%.
Yeah, 63% of the total annual projection is where we're at right now.
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. So going forward, we've got some of the other items that we're targeting. From this time, this presentation last year to today, there's been a lot of changes. Just talking about some of the software and some of that investment towards our processes and our goals. But this board's also been heavily involved with the others, which is that investment in staff. We've had a couple of reclassifications come through. Can't say they're done. We've also got another compensation study coming through. It's very exciting from the staff's perspective, to see that investment. So it's one, thank you. Two, it's impactful. The effort and everything that's gone into getting the numbers to where they're at has been extraordinary. I can't say that it's sustainable. So getting that foundation, getting the tools necessary for them to continue to do that and continue to perform at that level, we're there. So that's why to us it's very exciting. It's a very exciting time. There's going to be a lot of changes coming forward in our department because of those processes, and it's all kind of with the bigger picture in mind of just providing better service, and it's becoming easier to provide a service level that we just haven't even been at. So it's kind of an anomaly, but it's exciting to report that that's where we're at. That's it.
I would just say, I'm just happy to see that we're at 90% consistently because, you know, I was here when that fight started. And I'm quite happy that you know, like I say, it's been a long road, and it needed to be done, and I'm glad that you're doing it.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. You know what? I did forget something. I'll tell you one other thing that we're targeting. We've struggled with this in the past, and it's kind of this reinforcement of or an alleviation of pressure to not have to explain yourself when you get out on site. And it's just presence. So showing up right now, our folks show up in jeans and t-shirts, and we've got a few items that the county's provided that, you know, logo and identifying. Not all of our inspections are rough framing or, you know, nice progressive inspections. Some of them, many of them are violations, and we'll do teams to do that, whatever it may be, depending on the circumstances. So one of the items that we beefed up in this budget has been gear, stuff that, you know, is recognizable, shirts that, you know, say P&D, planning development, you know, building division, inspector, you know, front, back, side, all that stuff. So I wanted to highlight that just because it's been a priority from the staff level. Just, you know, some of them ask for radios. They're not always in the best positions. At least getting that identifying gear will help. You know, that's been something that they've been excited to hear that, hey, there's one less thing they got to worry about. Yeah.
Adam, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I wondered if you considered the stream gauge at Thompson Road in the budget. We had that meeting at the table, and I wondered if the county had considered taking more of the financial responsibility for that so they could then have access to all the data.
So this budget does include the same allocation that was approved last year, which would be
half.
It does. Half, correct, $5,000.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, anything with spongy moss?
You know, I don't have.
I was gonna ask.
Are you really?
Yeah.
You know what? I think that may be Pete standing up.
Yeah.
But yeah, whew.
It's kind of, we're trading notes here while we're talking, and yeah, I don't even know how much money to set aside.
Yeah.
But you know, we have a contingency budget, we have a non-departmental budget. You know, if it was the board's direction and pleasure, we could park a few dollars there. But it's a tough one.
It's an 18-member board too, and I'm sure that we're not all opinion on
Who's getting
that.
service and how, and
Yeah.
But would that be in his budget, or would that be in the health department budget?
I think it would not be it.
Right.
And I'd probably be inclined to put it in a non-departmental budget. It's probably would, you know, it's going to be contract services coordinated probably by our office. I don't know.
You know, and the feds and the states and everyone that they all say that those laws have passed and now they're looking for the front line and we're just a residual, and I don't think we're going to save those trees. So I mean, it's so many different opinions on that.
Yeah, this is a difficult issue, and this is a really difficult time. When we visited this issue earlier in the spring, it was already too late for us to do something as an organization to get any program in place, because we would have to start in October, November the previous year. The direction was, you know, let's work with our residents, put out a call to get
Identify them, right? Mm-hmm.
Traps, and we actually had a really good response. I mean, our Nancy Johnson from the DNR, Department of Agriculture, had issued over 100 traps. We had good response from our residents who were truly concerned and passionate about their trees. And we've had several presentations, both from the Department of Agriculture and from Conservation District on this issue, both with different approaches on how they handle it. And so really, it comes down to what does the county board do? The data is now coming in. That we're getting them. It's going to the Department of Agriculture. They're compiling that data, and I'm hoping that within the course of this month we'll get a better understanding of where those hotspots are. Now, those hotspots are just that. They were a hotspot this year. Doesn't mean they're going to be a hotspot next year. So I'm going to get guidance from the experts in the field on really what we do. But it's going to bring it to the county board to say, does the county do anything, and if so, what, and to what extent? So what Pete is suggesting is, we don't know right now what's going to happen. There's budget is coming due. You're going to have to see those numbers. Do we put money in there to give you that option as a county board as to whether or not you want to do a program? You still have that option as long as we have some money parked. But the data is going to tell you, and then the guidance from the experts are going to tell you what the best approach would be. And we can get moving on it this year if the county board wants to do something now. 2 years that we've done this program, 2009, 2010, it was $50,000 and $10,000. So to give you some scale of what that cost. And those are 2009, 2010 dollars. I don't know what it cost this year. That's still the information that we have to find out. But that's where we sit. And you know, there's so much information out there. You know, there's a population explode and then crash, like trends would suggest. Or, you know, our residents going to be faced with another round of spongy moths, which, you know, and some have treated the trees themselves. They were able to get in at their cost, which, you know, this is something that the county board will have to consider too, is really what is the county's role in this issue? So that's a policy question.
Perhaps there's a cost share option too. You know,
I mean, but then do we answer to
make sure people want this.
Right?
That's my concern is.
Do we answer
That
to
one
the
neighborhood had
beekeepers?
26 affected homes, and I think only 19 chose to even want it.
You know, and I just keep thinking 3 years from now, we're gonna answer to the beekeepers and the aviaries for, you know, all the residual that those sprays and, you know, insecticides are gonna cost. You know, I mean, there's just a lot. The conservation department, they truly feel that there's a residual effect that spraying those trees that are gonna kill some other.
They were pretty clear. Their approach is surgical. They find a tree, they will deal with that tree specifically, as opposed to the blanket. But there's different approaches. I do want to report, you know, this is obviously something that has come to the table, and it's important that we, as an organization, know about that. And I'm going to be attending a series of workshops actually on spongy moths. It's like it's a national convention of all the experts that get together.
Moth camp.
I'm excited. That's what
They have to get them a shirt.
But as we said, we're not subject matter experts on it, and you know, there are some in and around. But it's important that as you look to us as your staff for guidance, that we have an understanding of what we're talking about. So hopefully through that, there's going to be a lot of experts, a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of different approaches of different programs, and we'll be in a better position. But this won't occur until the end of October. But once again, if we at least position ourselves to keep that option open for you, you'll be able to make some good policy decisions. But truly, they are going to be policy decisions. You're going to have to weigh, you know, that these are public resources versus the benefit it's going to provide generally and individually.
Well, I think we did allude to, at least, that the county wanted to help these residents. And we did talk about budget commitment to this problem. And so if we're going to be our word, or, I mean, I would like to see what would it look like to put some funds aside, even if we're a matching fund, to support the residents. Because if the spongy moth grows, it won't just be those 19 residents. It'll travel across the county. If there's something we could do, then, you know, as the county, we could help. We certainly, or if we don't need the money, then the money rolls back into the general fund. I'd like to see what a potential compromise for us could be regarding this, because we have been in touch with those residents for months and months about this issue, and they've done everything that the Department of Agriculture has requested, and they've been really patient. And you know, while I hear John's concerns, when I look at the research, it doesn't look like that would have a significant impact, but I could be wrong. That would be my position, is that we have some funds set aside so that if this explodes, we're ahead of the game instead of behind it.
I think we're 10 years.
We're in the Oaks here.
Can I-
Weeds in the Oaks here. Instead of his project.
Yeah,
Budget.
Can I respond to that?
sure.
Okay. I'm going to just respectfully disagree that I don't think that we as a board or even a committee committed to doing anything for these residents. I think that they came in and made their best case. They've come in multiple times. We've heard from the Conservation District. We've heard from the Department of Ag. There is a huge, what do you say, fallout in terms of, you know, kind of impact to other species. Oaks are the host species for this whole order of Lepidopterus or whatever, it's some name that covers all of these categories of moths or in their caterpillar stage. And I think there's been over like 400 or 500 that have been identified in our county that use oaks as their host species. So it's not just killing off the spongy moth, it's killing off any others that are in that larva stage at that time. So there's a lot of potential. And these are the food sources for migratory birds. So I don't know that we would get consensus as a board about what is the best scientific approach on this to begin with. Some families are going to decide they're not going to spray philosophically because they don't want to have that residual impact. Others are going to say, no, I want to save the tree because that's more important. It's a habitat. Okay, so I think we're not even out of that discussion, let alone the money discussion. And then you can get into fairness. I mean, there are a lot of things that are going to happen over time, especially as climate changes and we have different diseases and different pests that come up here because they're no longer getting killed over the winters because we don't get that frost long enough. We run the risk of setting ourselves up to start funding a whole sorts of things. I mean, we've got pine beetle going through. Now, it's not, pine beetle's big. My neighbor had to take down 2 or 3 of his trees. Nobody's paying him to do that. You know, so it's a really, really complicated issue, and I don't believe that we've obligated ourselves in any way on this issue. I do think it's something that we need to consider and discuss, but I'm not promising dollars at this point.
Okay. I'd like to get back to the budget if he's done.
That's all right.
My one, you stated you were status quo.
Yes.
So you're coming forward when the board has their discussions on budget levies, that your department is a flat levy, basically.
Correct.
It's no cut, it's no increase.
Correct.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear in my head.
I want to make one, and did note we would like to purchase some apparel for the P&D team, give them a more professional look on site. The auditor's office thought it was important that we let you guys know that was the expectation. We're going to put some dollars in the budget for that.
Yes, thank you, Pete, thank you.
We can buy some t-shirts for the team.
And the moth committee.
You
got some moth. Yeah, we'll get you a fancy label.
But yes, thank you.
I do appreciate seeing the increase that above that 90%. I do appreciate you guys working so hard at that, because that has been probably the #1 issue that I get calls on.
Yeah, I get it, yeah, and we see it. So we're excited about that, and we see, we can see this, read the signs when we're starting to slip backwards or whatever it might be, and we have a very reactive team. So it's become a habit. It's been good. Thank you. Excellent. All right, you'll get it. That's better.
You're not going anywhere, you got.
No, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, you're gonna stay right there for the short-term rental discussion?
I sure will. I am going to be referring a little bit to my notes. Thank you, thank you.
Oh, yeah, do we need a consensus to move that budget forward?
I'm in favor of moving it forward.
Thank you. Carolyn, yes?
Okay.
Yep.
You bet.
Lou, consensus to move that budget forward?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I vote yes too.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Short-term rentals.
Yep.
All right.
Discussion and direction, short-term rentals.
So, all right, so we've been asked to bring this forward to share how we handle and manage short-term rentals. In a nutshell, I want to say it's avoidable, but it's very difficult to say and assign the necessary requirements to these, and I'll lay out what they are. So we have, to be an Airbnb by right, you can have a maximum of 12 rental periods for no longer than 90 days. So whether you have 12 days a year or 9 of them in there for 90 days, those are your limits. You can operate with them. Anything above that, you'd be required to have a conditional use to do it. So if you're operating within those parameters, then those are the use standards in the UDO. Why I say it's difficult on the enforcement side is these are private deals. Whether they're through.
Identify and prove it.
Bingo. And so the honest ones may have a calendar that's published, and you can go through it, and so you can see that. And then once they take that down or they stop using that, now the enforceability goes away. And so recognizing that that's where we're at, I wasn't party, it was secondary in terms of how this came to be, but we went through an entire season. We've had a few flare-ups in terms of questioning if that was a short-term rental or complaints about them having parties or whatever it may be. And some of them were legitimate, where 3 different families purchased a house on Pistachio or the Fox River, and they just used it. They just coordinated their use of that property, and so we would get complaints. Hey, there's a new family here every week. That's just the owners. So vetting it in hindsight is usually pretty easy, but these are the complaints that we'll get. So one is going to be nuisance noise. A lot of those will go to the sheriff's office, and those get handled that way and addressed. On our side, we'll see parking complaints, whether it's an overflow or bustling parking on the site that just irritates people from the north. Outside of that, again, it's difficult for us to pin down and say that this is what it would be. So we looked at a couple of different, our surrounding counties, and some of them, I guess in detail, will look at this as a home-based business. If you rent it out and you live there, and you don't leave, I should say it that way, when they come and rent it. So it's like an Airbnb or a bed and breakfast style almost. And then they'll have some stipulations in terms of maximum number of people, 2 per bedroom, and certainly they're only using the principal structure, and then those bedrooms are not renting out. The family room can sleep 8, so you can have 22 people there, whatever it may be. And then if it's a whole house rental and you move out, Cook County is probably the one that has the most detail in terms of what they've used. If it's a whole house rental, they will have that turn into a conditional use or a special use permit required. And it doesn't talk much about the actual 12 times per year or 90 days. It's an either or. You either are renting the whole house out or you're not in those short terms, whether it's on our side, we have it for 30 days or less is how you define those short-term rentals. So, I had a partner in crime with me, but she's out today. So I'm kind of going through this a little bit, trying to hit the highlights and see if there's any background discussion you'd like to dive deeper into.
I'd like to get away from the number of days, because I just think it's an impossible task.
Sure.
And I think when you get to the courtroom, you can't prove it. And the result is that you gotta, you just have an enforcement problem. I mean, the Cook County thing makes some sense to me only because you can tell.
Right.
You know, I mean, I think that however we design the ordinance, it should be designed so that you can actually enforce it. I mean, I'm not sure that this is the major problem in the county right now, but if we're going to create any kind of ordinance, I would want to make certain we can enforce it. Yeah.
Is this an issue that comes up quite a bit, Adam?
It's certainly seasonal. Our Airbnb, our rental market in this area is going to be focused on the bodies of water. So whether it's Fox or Pistachio, those are going to be the big ones. We get a little bit of some whispers around Lake.
There was one on Hillside that we had trouble with a few years back, and I mean, they rented it out to a fraternity in Chicago, that kind of stuff, and so they had, 100 people show up for a party for the weekend. Hillside and Crystal Lake, yeah. And it wasn't in Crystal Lake, it was in our turf. Yeah, so, I mean, you can have that, but you can have that problem in a house. Somebody shows up and decides they're gonna let their kid have a party.
Happened to me once.
I understand.
You see, Adam, are you seeing the same thing, with the county as it is with the municipalities? Similar problems?
They have regulations, so I mean, when we looked at these, we looked at McHenry, Crystal Lake, Algonquin, Cary, Harvard, and Richmond. Not all of them have, some of them just don't allow rentals for shorter than 30 days, and therefore don't have a zoning path to do it. It's just something that's prohibited. And others do, and whether they have a zoning process to certify it, like a special use permit, or they just allow it and they don't have a process. That's what I'm seeing in this matrix, where there's a varied response. And it really comes down to enforceability is what the consensus was. So understanding and laying that out, once we have, if you will, the complaint that generates the focus, then we try to work through realistically with whoever that property owner is, and usually that conversation starts with, well, what do you want to do? How do you if your goal is to rent this, great, here's how you get there. And so you get a lot of truth in that, but you can also see how there's some flaws. You don't want to necessarily steer them paint them into a corner, but it tends to happen. Like I said, the honest people come forward and they share their whole calendar, and it's like, all right, listen, you have to do this. And you don't want to push them to be a liar, but many times if they say yes or don't say anything, then they're out of it, and so it becomes tricky to enforce.
And if you want to see it as an industry, go to Disney World.
I mean, Florida, anywhere, any coastal. In a lot of those villages and, little towns, they were always against them until they realized that it actually brought the values up instead of bringing them down, because you have to have a nice house to do an Airbnb. You can't have a blighted property, right? You can't have a blighted property. And so it usually brings the neighborhood, lifts it up, it doesn't bring it down. But identify them, I don't know how you can.
Well, I can tell you, because Woodstock does not have a decent hotel, right? And it's one of the national destination centers. They rely heavily on Airbnbs for housing for people coming into town for events or visiting. And I wonder what they do, probably kind of the same what Crystal Lake and McHenry does. But when I hear short-term housing, I think of like the Holiday Inn Express for people who are mobile and travel, or what are those nurses, the traveling nurses come in for 3 or 4 or 5 months and either can rent an apartment. Well, you can't hardly do that anymore, but so I guess it's not just the parties. You're trying to manage the aberrant behavior, right? That comes from people using those as party sites or overwhelming the building.
That was what I understood from the request and why we want to talk about it. And as we get out of this season, where Airbnbs are going to be the most prevalent in terms of the complaints that are generated, it opens the conversation and the opportunity to revise those regulations as we go into the winter.
What are the number of complaints that we get a year on this, average?
That's where my partner in crime would have been pretty handy. If I were to guess, it's a couple a month. You're talking about a half a dozen a month or so. We have some spikes. Through COVID, those numbers were higher. We saw a lot of the staycationers or the people that maybe go somewhere else and then rent their house out, and people were looking for alternative outings. So those numbers were up. I haven't had any directly, is I guess the other piece.
Are we stepping on ourselves getting into something like this? In other words, you're regulating something that's going to be very difficult, as you're saying. You're trying to regulate something and it just creates other problems, the unintended consequences.
That's kind of why I was asking Adam with the minister, are they having a problem and we are and they're not? It's not an issue with them.
Well, my thought, agree with you. Woodstock, example, municipality. A lot of the riverfronts are municipalities. And yeah, we do have unincorporated areas of all of that, which I guess is where we would fall in. I just have difficulty creating more
work,
more regulation unnecessarily for a few complaints. When I look at the governor passed a law that now the police department can fly a drone over these places when they're having a party. Yeah, they can fly. They just passed it. They signed it last week that our sheriff now can fly a drone over a party. Okay, and if there's a complaint, the sheriff should be able to handle that with the noise ordinance and everything. I don't know.
Well, that's the one thing I was going to ask you, Adam. I mean, is this something that we would want to inspect the house, or we would just want to regulate the hours of, under noise, violations or nuisances?
That's the trend, is that it becomes a mechanism in between disturbance of the peace and sheriff's and police response and just having no regulation on it. So it becomes an opportunity for the jurisdiction of the county to assign some use standards or some conditions to that use, just as with any other conditional use, which would include hours of operation, maximum occupancy, annual inspection, re-inspection. That would, pending approval of that, then you would have those renewals or the registration. We see two approaches. We have regulations, but they're kind of passive and they're difficult to enforce, or a very hard line. If you're going to do this, you're going to do it right. And if that was the path that the county board wished to pursue, it would be a recommendation to really amend the building codes as well to assign what do we want these houses to look like, because it's a very quick switch from a residential use to a commercial use, and the building code would look at those just like they're hotels. And when you have a hotel, the way that interprets the code interprets that as short-term stay with people that are unfamiliar with the site, and so they have maximum safety standards,
and then,
including sprinkler systems.
I almost see it as like a townhouse. You have more than 4 units. You need sprinklers. You have less, than you don't need sprinklers. I could almost see if somebody wanted to do it, they could be, designated as an approved house for that, but they could themselves get that designation, and if they don't, well, they'll let the market, decide. But how is the states or state to state doing it? I mean, I don't see us as a vacation state that we have too much of an issue there, but maybe I'm wrong. Joe?
I remember, it's just 25 years ago, but they had the bed and breakfast change, and if you had more than 5 bedrooms in your bed and breakfast, you had to sprinkler it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's still the law or not. I just know that I had clients that were dealing with that a long time ago. And, to suddenly find out you got to sprinkler a building, after the fact is not.
It's not enjoyable. Yeah, and 5 is still a marker in the building codes, yeah.
Are we trying to discourage this revenue stream for residents? That's my question. Is that what we're trying to do here?
Can I add to that? Because I don't know, because what I'm not sure of completely is it sounds like we have these regulations in place, but that it really depends on the goodwill of the person who owns the residence to comply or not comply. So in a sense, what we have right now isn't working anyway. So the determination is, do we make them, because the other thing is there's a fine line between people using it for occasionally renting it out and being, good faith effort and being good neighbors to taking it in a totally different direction where now they're bringing in too many people, or maybe we're violating not having the proper codes or the sprinklers or what we need for the safety for now how it's being used. So we have some regulations in place. It sounds to me like what we have really is only working insofar as people are being honest about how they're doing it. So we have to at least fix what we have. I mean, we can't have nothing, I guess is my feeling. So I would be open to just continuing to, you said that Chicago had something that felt like it was a good model.
Cook County has one that's pretty well laid out. It allows some variation. If someone doesn't want to, someone doesn't want to go through the whole process of being a commercial business in their standpoint, then it would have the homeowner living on site. And maybe they don't want to do that, and that would be the trigger. But it comes with some caveats that would allow just flexibility. And nobody has the same standards at all. But I don't think anyone's got it all figured out either. Let's say that.
So I'm open to pursuing that so that we at least are correcting what we have so that it makes sense.
Well, and respectfully, I understand your position, but a county that has probably the least vacation homes in the area, why would we be the one that's going to fix it? But, let's let, St. Petersburg, Florida, or Napa Valley, how do they do it, and show us what they've done, because they've actually had to deal with it, right? I mean, reach out to see how vacation destinations actually deal with those Airbnbs, rather than us reinventing the wheel that really nobody travels down the road, isn't so well traveled. Maybe I should say,
If you only got a handful of incidences a year, why waste the time and effort?
I hate to see your budget go all out of whack just over, something like this.
Right, there's some reality to that. I mean, if we go pretty far towards the control, then there likely would be some personnel requirements, demand anyway, to keep maintaining those registrations, conduct those inspections. And I don't know the permit volume that we would see, or in terms of the volume.
It would seem to me that if we have a noise ordinance and it gets violated, if we have a capacity ordinance, if we say, if you rent a 2-bedroom rental, you can have up to this many. Airbnbs do it. They'll say 6 people, 8 people. If we have some structure in place to hold those people who violate those, we currently have that. Now, whether the police enforce that law or not, or whether the county has the personnel to go out there and check occupancy, those things still exist. We just don't, do we not enforce those, the current?
So, well, there's two questions there, and I'll answer the one that I'm most comfortable with answering. It's the capacity. There's every structure is designed to have a maximum potential occupancy, residences and commercial buildings alike, but there's no specific regulation on whether or not you can have, especially on a residence, where you can't have anybody over X amount. So we wouldn't, on a single instant, have the authority to say you have too many people here. For a building that's used for commercial uses, that's different. The fire code is pretty clear in terms of having a maximum occupancy. And if you go over that, they have some standards that you can address that over occupant load through until you hit another certain level, and then you have to keep people out. So, but on a residential standpoint, we wouldn't have that ability or the authority. To the noise ordinance, it's coming up.
The sheriff's office is not going to use the noise ordinance, and that was affirmed again by the new sheriff this season. I think he took some good steps as the weather warmed up and first started to get our complaints primarily about activity on the river and these small narrow lots where a loud neighbor isn't very far away. But what they did, I think with Chief Morosky, was kind of standardized their response. Every patrol officer had the same written response. This is what we do with noise situations. This is how you file a disorderly conduct, complaint. And that was important to the sheriff to get everybody saying exactly the same thing relative to noise. And they did that, I think, in May.
So what do they say?
I can find it for you.
Okay.
They never said.
Something to the effect that this is how you complain about noise and this is the process. And
But are they found, I guess to my point, not to nail you down to that level of detail, but if somebody does have a complaint and it is a violation of the noise ordinance, does the sheriff's deputies go in and enforce it?
Well, it's a state ordinance, it's not a local ordinance.
We don't have a noise ordinance here? Okay.
we have
No, actually, we don't have a local noise
You have to go to the
ordinance.
state.
We have something that was signed in 2018 and it's very vanilla.
Because I thought you did at the time that there was another issue about noise back about that.
There was, Carolyn, and we didn't do anything about creating a clear noise ordinance in unincorporated McHenry County.
It specifically does not reference the sheriff's office as an enforcement.
Or something, okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to.
Well, so, and adding to your point of occupancy, I mean, we travel and Airbnbs are really clear about how many people you can have in their units. Maybe that's an issue for the Airbnb people to manage until we come up with something. I mean, I don't know.
Exactly. Invent their wheel. It just doesn't make sense.
Why don't I find what the sheriff's office is distributing to its deputies?
Yeah.
That can be our next step.
Because in 18, we decided we're not going to be the police. We have police, right? We're not going to arm Adams people to go and take this under a development ordinance.
Adam's staff work primarily 8 to 4:30 Monday to
Right,
Friday. That's
exactly,
not the problem.
exactly. That's why we didn't do it, though. I mean, Joe and I were.
Yeah, but here's the thing, I mean, we have a structure that we could strengthen while we're developing a thoughtful ordinance around this issue. What's the point of calling the sheriff and saying it's 11 o'clock at night and there's a party going on? If we don't have any way of managing the noise, then let's not pretend we do. Let's just say we don't
We don't play sheriff either, though. you know?
Yeah.
Call the sheriff,
Problem with regulations.
yeah.
Well, the state of Illinois has a statute on it, and it's nearly impossible to enforce. It requires you to meter the site, requires you to find out how much louder it is in the ambient noise levels. And that's why the sheriff for years ago said, no, I'm not doing that.
Well,
I'm not gonna set a guy out on the street for 2 hours while he's monitoring the noise.
Yeah.
Right. Can we move on? Do we need to do anything with this?
No, I think we can move on.
Well, I think there's probably a solution we should think about and discuss and keep it on the agenda. What is the solution right now? It might not be perfect, but you're right, because I called it after that gentleman came to our board. I called a couple of chiefs on you, and they said, look, we're not going to put a decibel meter in every squad car. That means you have to call the person who has it to meet you to go to the property, and then you're not on patrol. And I mean, there are very real considerations for the police around the state ordinance. I guess I would ask Joe.
This isn't even on.
This isn't on our
This isn't even on our
agenda.
agenda.
We're on
We're talking
rentals.
about, we're not talking about noise ordinance here.
Well, no, but
I'm
I
gonna
just
request that we
wanted-
move on to 9.2 here because we spent about half an hour on this and, yeah.
9.2 is gonna be a little harder.
Yeah, 9.2 is gonna be a little bit more difficult too, so if we could move on, Lydia, unless you're.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks.
All right.
The rodeos.
Rodeos. All right. So this has been another action-packed weekend. We had 2 rodeos that had applied for temporary uses. One was on Sunday and another one was on Saturday with a horse show on Sunday. So 2 different events, both had rodeo components to them. In the wake of everything that happened, leading up to these, the sheriff's office, certainly looking at their security plan, they looked at it in a little bit more detail. And Pete and I met with several of the deputies that were on duty for that incident at Lamb Road. We also discussed with the state's attorney and control what some other measures, trying to just sweep all of the issues and potential solutions into a pile.
Kathy also met with us.
Yes, and Kathy, yes.
And just because it's not related to this committee, but what changes we are going to need in our liquor ordinance potentially for next season as well, because clearly liquor was.
So,
Yeah, certainly didn't help anything. So the events that took place this weekend were both BYOB. They didn't have a liquor license component to them, which makes it a total variable. And then talking with the sheriff's office, and they looked at both of these. They assigned, in terms of risk, 6 off-duty deputy required for one event, 8 for the other. And they just didn't have the personnel. By come 3 o'clock, I think they had 2 signed up for one and 3 for another.
We needed 14 deputies, and we had 5.
So the permits were revoked. They were issued in anticipation of this agreement, and we were required to revoke them just because we couldn't get sign off from that. So, as we understand it, we believe that the events did occur. And one of them we know for sure because there was a response in terms of animal, a call out from the sheriff. That's what we know at this point. So, did we solve anything with the revocation? I'm not sure, but we're working towards potential solutions to at least the low-hanging fruit going into the off-season. So these are the last 2. There was one other scheduled, but we've been informed by that applicant that they're likely withdrawing it. That's the one up on Graff Road. We'll see if they withdraw it. I think it's the 28th or the 26th, whatever that weekend is of September. Going forward, there's a lot of investment and confirmation from the fire districts. They're willing to provide on-site medical for these. In talking with one of the event holders this past week, they want as much as we would have discussed, at least at the last one, in terms of having an on-site vet to evaluate the animals as they go forward. That has been a challenge for the event holders that I think we'll see another issue like we don't have the adequate security to cover it. If we have this requirement for on-site vet, making sure that that's in place, it sounds like that's a difficult thing to get. Whether that's difficult because of financial reasons or just availability, I'm not sure, but we'll find out if that's the way the board wishes to pursue. So those are the big updates that we have in terms of sheriff's office and security. I think they've got a better formula, much more communication on the topic in terms of fire, sheriff, security plans, and emergency preparedness. And then it seems as if, but it would have to be an amendment to the UDO that the on-site veterinarian would be something that would be achievable if the board wishes to go that way. And then as liquor goes, I think that's still unfolding, is the best I can say.
I think we know what we want.
Can I just get some clarification though?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, would you want to say something first? Okay. So the license got pulled because
The permit.
the permit got pulled, sorry, because they
Correct.
couldn't get the deputies, they couldn't get the security. Right, we couldn't provide the security. But it went ahead anyway. So the fact that it was a BYOB and they didn't need a liquor license, did we have any legal authority over it anyway because it's on private property? I don't understand.
It's a violation of our permit. It's not necessarily a big crime, but it's a violation. If they did this operation, there should be a ticket someplace.
Be an ordinance violation.
Or, so it's an
Yeah.
ordinance violation. So there is some kind of.
Yeah, and then, we haven't even regrouped to discuss it with the zoning division in terms of what that enforcement looks like. But we're also aware that the penalty for violating these standards it's a moratorium, and it doesn't stipulate to fines, it doesn't stipulate to anything, it just says that it may impact the ability for this property to obtain a temporary use in the future for a period up to 1 year.
Definitely a loose end that we need to tie up a little bit.
Well,
Yeah.
that's.
I think there's two categories here. There's one is the safety and the alcohol issue
Yep.
in the group. And the other one is the animal side. And I can see the animal side creating the potential largest conflict, actually, to me, that I see, I should say, is that because you have the animal rights people who are flying drones over these. I was doing some studying last night on this and looking for definitions, and here they're showing they're flying a drone over these things, which to me is a violation on its own, and a violation of property rights and personal thing, because who knows what they're actually using drones for, over everything. And so this drone thing really bothers me, although it's in a way, it is helping their situation in the animal welfare situation. So it creates, this creates a whole new set of problems of property rights and privacy violations when these drones are above these anywhere. If you're having a party and they're flying a drone, well, the governor just signed that law that the sheriff can do that, but a personal, private individual group cannot or should not be able to fly a drone above an event. It's a dangerous situation if that crashes.
That issue, I don't think, it's not
Yeah.
us. The state's attorney and the sheriff, I think, got their arms around that one pretty good.
Exactly, is that creates a problem, and it should be there and not us, I agree, because that's where I was going
I
with this.
had that conversation again last week with Chief Morosky and Norman. So I think they got their arms around that and how a property owner can, cite somebody else for a violation of privacy. I think they got their arms around that. But what we need to do is to change our temporary use ordinance, right?
Yeah.
To lower that threshold from 2,500 expected at event to something else. Maybe that's 500 to kick in a series of other safety steps that the fire department want, emergency management wants. And then the final one is, do we require a veterinarian? That could be a deal breaker in many instances.
You know, something just came to my mind. They used to have that company, the Big Hat Rodeo Company or whatever, somewhere in McHenry County that used to go around and do those rodeos, right? They were a little bit more of like a country western rodeo, you know, with barrel racing and stuff like that. But should we have a license for a rodeo? I mean, you're gonna perform a rodeo, you have to be licensed and under standards that you have to have a veterinarian that, you know, make sure that you're not abusing animals. I mean, is that somewhere where we could handle this?
Is my understanding that the Illinois Department of Ag has oversight over animals used for commercial purposes. So I don't think it's gonna be a big jump for these folks to have, you know, the veterinarian records and, hey, this has been certified this week and they're out. But I think that same vet probably oversees numerous different pods of animals is kind of what we've gathered from animal control. So it may be redundant, but certainly willing to vet it.
Yeah.
The other thing that's going on right now is the animal control group has filed suit against both Boone and Will counties on this issue. And I look at like ours versus Boone, we have no regulations. Boone has a bunch of regulations and they're the ones that are in the hot seat right now getting sued.
Yeah.
Didn't they just put theirs in though?
They just, well, I don't know when they just put it in, but I know that the lawsuit just got filed a week ago, 10 days ago, something like that.
The drones were fine Sunday. Animal control was called out. Animal control did look at, what I'm told, they looked at the videos that were collected, that did not have enough evidence in their mind to cite anybody for any animal abuse. So we were responsive in that.
Right.
So my question is, why are they responsive? Why is our department responsive to that? When an animal rights group flies a drone to me, which is illegal, and now we're participating in that illegal activity by reacting to that. The sheriff should be the one reacting.
Do we know that flying drones over and filming is illegal? Is that illegal? I don't know that it is.
It's out in public. Google's got your.
I'm not saying it's right, but I don't know if it's illegal, Jim.
Well, here's another question, but here's a question.
There's a regulation we should be putting.
But here's a question though. I mean, we have a situation where animals are being used in a certain way and there's nobody on site. I mean, my understanding, and I could be wrong, but I'm hearing it from another county board member, so I think that they've got good information. Part of the reason we didn't end up having more deputies come forward was because the last time around, they couldn't get out of the parking lot. They had an incident and they weren't getting the support from the security on staff. And that's not a good situation for our deputies. We also have animals on site. Apparently there was somebody who tried to say something last time around and they were escorted out by the people at the venue. So how do you protect the animals? I mean, you deal with animals too. It's a concern to all of us that they be protected. If we don't go in, or if a veterinarian on site is a requirement and a US licensed veterinarian who is based in our standards is on site, then you have somebody who can protect them in the sense that if it's getting out of hand, they can call somebody in. But right now, there's no mechanisms in place. So if we just stand by and say, well, we can't do anything if nobody says anything, and people inside aren't allowed to say anything, at what point do we protect the animals? I mean, that's part of our job too. So
Could you roll that up into the ordinance and then put some teeth into the ordinance? Because I'm kind of getting from what you're saying is, you got an ordinance, but it's got no teeth.
It's got specific standards, right? And you know, to violate it, it's not as strong as some violation consequences, for sure.
So the objectionable events that are hard on the animals is the tripping and the tailing, right? That's
Pulling backwards.
Some of them,
you know,
some of them don't want you to butcher an animal. I mean, the people that came into our meetings for a slaughterhouse and object, and there are people who who are gonna object to, eating an egg, for crying out loud, as much. So they're always gonna have that problem. The rodeos are always gonna have that problem. But if you were to, in our ordinance, and maybe that's why they're getting sued, I don't know, because they put that in their ordinance, that they have no tailing, no tripping, I don't know why, what would draw that suit. Because it becomes a slippery slope once we do some of this. But I can see where this tailing event is it's cruel and it's hard on the animals when you watch those, even their own videos that they're doing. Some of these folks are even putting their own videos on YouTube and all of that. They put their own group on there and they show as kind of a promotion of themselves. As you're going around the internet trying to find this, study this a little bit. So the ones they put on don't look so cruel, but when you start watching them further and further, you'll see where it really does hurt those animals. So if you take those really abusive ones, and the other part of that is maybe we need to require them that they use the same as the sanctioned rodeos, the national, the ones that come into the county.
Exactly, because they have a standard.
And you make them have that standard in the veterinarian. But that's the animal approach, I think, if we were to do it that way.
No, but there's another, if you can't get security, off-duty police officers to work rodeos because they don't get backup, because these events are too chaotic, it's a public safety issue. So from the get-go, if we can't assure a safe event where the animals and public safety are at the top of the list, then we have to create ordinances that prohibit that. John, maybe the best way, and I don't know that Zach been on the board very long, I could be completely off base, is that we asked some of the members of this committee to meet with Adam's staff, and we propose some, we gather some information, we come back to this committee with some recommendations, because I wouldn't believe that anybody on this committee would approve of animal cruelty.
Well, I agree with that, but Lou, even Adam said earlier that they want to regroup and get more information, so why don't we, before we do that, let Adam do his homework and regroup and get that information, and then we can see where he comes up with next month, and then handle it, make a decision next month on that. Because this is gonna come back, right?
They did the right thing by revoking the permit because they couldn't ensure the safety.
You have the safety issue there.
That was why we did it. It was pretty clear. Of the need.
We had a conversation with the sheriff and with the chairman Friday afternoon.
Adam, how many of these do we have scheduled for the rest of the year?
I misspoke. I thought that one in the end of the month was canceled or to be withdrawn, and I got a live update. We have at least one more. That'll be October 7th.
Okay.
But again, we gotta have deputies willing to work it, given our current situation.
Are these the same people that went for this one that was revoked?
This would be a different group. This would be a different.
Okay.
Well, ones that did it after they were revoked, what's the penalty for them still holding that?
There's
your moratorium.
Maximum, it would be up to 1 year.
Why don't you just say you're done?
You're done.
Do they have any other schedule?
They're done for the year anyway.
No.
That was,
So
that
you're done?
But you're done, period, because all they have to do is wait a year and a day, and if they're doing them in the fall anyway, so every year they're a day later. I mean, what is that?
No, I agree on that.
Like I said, there's not a lot of teeth behind this ordinance, because this same event holder could move to the property next door and they would be in good standing.
So, yeah.
But you can't put teeth into the ordinance that where they're getting hauled off to the Hoot Scout, they ignored having a permit and
You're
still
probably
had
gonna
their
have trouble
event.
putting somebody in jail over an ordinance violation, but okay.
But if you had a
Careful
big,
what you're
you
Again,
know,
slippery slope on
rodeo,
that too.
Yeah, you're gonna have trouble with that.
Okay, but so we have a situation where they went ahead with the rodeo anyway. We have another one coming up in October. Last time we knew these were coming up and you and I talked after the last meeting, is there a way to pull the permit? Is there a way to stop this from happening? And we felt like there wasn't any way we could get something by the board in time for that to happen. So now we know we have something in October. Are we just gonna wait to see what happens then, or is there a way to do something about it now?
To adopt amendments to the ordinance would take,
You're not gonna get it.
You're not
So,
gonna get it. You
okay.
gotta get
Be in the
50
same
notice
position.
just to have the zoning hearing.
But if they don't
Right.
have enough security on site willing to do this, then we allow it to go ahead anyway?
if we're in the same position as we were on Friday, I think we would end up with the same decision where we would revoke them.
Okay. And then whether or not they do it or not is then because they could do it. But I agree with, if they violate it, it's not only just the property, it's the person, and it's indefinite.
They will send in another person, but
Well, yeah,
your other adoptions of other things to adopt though is the sanctioning, the professional rodeo side,
Yeah.
not just the fly-by-night.
I mean,
I shouldn't say these aren't
you've got
fly-by-night.
templates,
They're
I'm
rodeos.
sure, with Professional Rodeo Association, you know, I'll bet they have a minimum standard that we could go with to throw in our ordinances on rodeos.
And to that effect, we've compiled quite a bit of information from, there's a National Cowboy Rodeo Association, there's another one, the Women's Cowboy Rodeo Association, and those are the two that have been the most fruitful in terms of the different requirements, whether it's related to animal maximum use, if you will, and then veterinarian oversight, and if one falls, one trips, whatever it might be.
Well, I say we let you regroup, get those to us, and let's see if we can get it going as quickly as possible.
Another consideration here, or concern of mine, this is a highly one ethnic group. It's their way of life. And they do this. They grow up here, they like horses, they like animals. It's a big part of our county in all of our 5-acre parcels out there that have been abandoned basically, or would be abandoned. They're taking these up, they're cleaning them up, they're paying their taxes and everything else. But this is, and I'm not trying to be prejudiced here, I'm not being prejudiced. I'm being understanding of the ethnic ways that we all have a different culture.
Yeah, but ethnic ways at bullfighting too, and bullfighting is just not legal, right?
And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You have to adopt the American standard, and that's where we gotta be careful here, that we don't clash in all this.
Yeah. I mean, a group from Madrid, they're not gonna come and have a bullfight in, McHenry County. It's not legal, right? So you
that's what I'm saying
can't
is-
pull a calf backwards by its tail.
Seriously, I don't know that we got a UDO ordinance on that.
I would think that that's
a
a
reality.
Maybe we ought to.
In some sense, when you're talking about the tailing and the tripping, the style rodeo, we don't have a lot to find. We don't allow horse racing and other items that would be centered around the gambling aspect of it. And then there's some other generalized type pieces, but if definition on that style is something that would be something that the board would want to pursue, that'd be something we would have to create.
So do we have an ordinance against dog fighting or cockfighting or all the other kind of?
State has a statute on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, the state.
The state has a statute on animal fighting. That I'm sure I've seen that before.
I don't know if I want the state involved with it, but they probably will be eventually. I don't know if I want the state involved in telling us how we raise our animals and different things, because that's where they'll get extreme and do really stupid things.
Right.
To harm your, instead of just handling this type of situation, they'll go in for the total
One shoe
craziness.
fits all.
So
Yeah.
can you work on the minimum standards for us?
We'll
we can-
draft up a few different, the various angles to this and bring it back.
Yeah.
Chairman, just to move this discussion along.
Well, I think that we can absolutely promote there's a lot of art and skill in rodeos. They can be a great event for people to come out and really enjoy learning more about the animals, but it feels like several of these have deteriorated into kind of a brawl. And I think that then tarnishes the people who do a really good job in providing some real structure around managing these events. So if the Cowboys have a high standard, I absolutely think we should take a look at what they recommend for us to do. I have no problem having a higher standard than anybody else, so, because I think when you provide a safe event, people will come and spend money and have a good time. I wouldn't go to one of these.
Okay.
John, before we.
She might be the guy.
Yeah.
She should be our security.
Okay, yeah, Carl's got one quick question.
Sure. On the bottom of your PDF file that's attached to it,
Yes.
you have hours of application, music and speech. What's the difference between this situation and what we were talking about previous with the Airbnb of not having any noise or having to measure? I'm kind of confused because we did this with, in transportation when we allowed those couple to have a wedding thing on Saturday and you came up, they got a conditional use and it ended the conversation.
Yeah.
But that was brought up, so I'm a little confused how we have a noise and then we don't have a noise.
So this would be an example of how that would be implemented for Airbnbs. So these are gonna be use standards within the temporary entertainment event, as identified or as prescribed in the UDO. If we had something similar for Airbnbs, whatever you wanna call them, they would have a use standard that would talk about hours of operation, outdoor, music or loud music that would be amplified. So basically, turn it off at 10 or 11, whatever it might be. So this would be how we would regulate that.
So you can get this to us for a minimum standards by next meeting?
Yeah, definitely.
And look at that, we spent a half an hour on this.
Well spent.
But your public comment in your meeting will be an hour and a half.
Yes, oh, absolutely, absolutely, I understand.
So handle it
And I
now.
respect it, I respect that. Is there any more discussion or any more comments
I'm good.
before moving on? Okay, any old business? Just the ZBA reports then?
Yeah, I can throw something at you there. We've got 4 petitions. We do not have any solar. We had one that was on schedule. They actually asked to push it back a month. So we are solar free.
Darn it.
Mark that on the calendar.
We have 2 zoning changes, and these are really to straighten out some old zoning action that happened in the 70s and 80s to make lots buildable. So they're rezoning 2 different applications. They're rezoning the property to make it so that they can build on it. And then we do have a conditional use for it's under the use standards as a reception facility. But they're mostly religious and family events. There's no weddings or anything like that. But that's just how it fit in the ordinance. All 3 of those that I've described were unanimously recommended by the ZBA. The following one is a
Unanimous denial.
Yeah, I saw that.
what's that?
It's a unanimous denial. What happened?
Yeah, what happened? So this is a heavy retail sales and service operation. It started as a violation on the property owner's one property, and this petition is to move that operation to this property. There's neighbor opposition And the zoning board of appeals, I don't have the particulars of that hearing and what they rendered in terms of their denial, but yes, it was unanimous, 7-0 to recommend denial. So it's going to show up on the zoning, the regular zoning agenda as opposed to the routine consent zoning agenda.
So for that, does it need more than just a majority?
That one would require a 3/4, a supermajority vote, correct?
I concur.
Move to adjourn.
Wait a second.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
I do have one other item. So
Yeah,
come on up, Scott, I've been talking, you guys are tired of hearing me.
So on item 7.3 on your agenda, you adopted the natural hazard mitigation plan. And that is a foundational document because it opens the door for the county and participating agencies to apply for BRIC funding. Basic, it's about building resilient infrastructure. So there's a tight deadline now to apply for BRIC funding. Now that we have the hazard mitigation plan underway, October 1, P&D staff is going to be submitting an application for the update of the stormwater management plan. This plan has been updated in, what did we say, 2000?
No, 1996.
1996.
7-1.
I'm sorry?
Water still flows the same way?
Yeah.
It's okay.
Anyway,
Good point.
The point being is we're going to be submitting an application under BRIC. We have a notice of intent that was out there that was adopted or approved. So the door's open to make that application. We just want to advise the committee that it will be forthcoming. If ultimately we decide not to accept that grant, if it's received, you have the option not to accept it. But it is a 25% local match. And I don't know what do you think about budget-wise for it?
That's been our biggest kind of wrestling point, but probably north of the 100.
Yeah, but I mean, so but that local match could be used up in in-kind services, staff time committed to the project, so on and so forth. But we want to make the committee aware of that application and the grant, and if we're approved, then we can determine whether or not we want to accept it. But just want to advise you accordingly.
No, that was spectacular.
Thanks.
Support my motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.